You know what you should do? You should follow me on Twitter at Brommer018. Link in the description. Do it now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another FIFA 21 Tactics video, the series where I show you how to recreate and adapt real life systems so they will actually work in FIFA 21. Ash here, aka Brommer18, back again, and today we are covering Ronald Koeman's Barcelona system, the most recent system, the 3-4-3 or the 3-4-1-2, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't really matter. Ultimately what matters is that there's three centre backs. You've got your four midfielders, the two wing backs who are essentially midfielders with the two centre mids, and then just three attackers, really. That's what it is. You just got three attackers who are roaming all over the pitch, which we will get into very shortly. This has been incredible, the amount of suggestions that I've had to cover this system. Obviously, it's a recent system in terms of when I'm recording this. It's only been played for around maybe not even 2 months, maybe 6-7 weeks maybe. So it's fairly recent, and obviously it's working very well for them. They pretty much reverted to it, I think, after the first PSG game in the Champions League where they lost. And then, of course, they played them in the replay and drew, but obviously that wasn't enough. But since in the league, since then, they've had a lot of success with it. So what we do, if you're new to this series, is, first of all, I show you any position changes that we do, which is, there is a couple. And we explain that, and then we go on to the tactics, and I talk about how to recreate the system tactically and what they do, and then we finish with player instructions. And what I do is I suggest suitable players for you to sign if you're playing career mode, for example, to sort of replicate that role as best as we can. So we really go through it in order. Quick word about the tactic itself. A really enjoyable tactic, I have to say. This is a system that you can have a lot of fun with. I had a lot of fun with it, and what I'll say is, what you'll see in the gameplay on the right hand side is, I was getting really frustrated at first, I'm not going to lie, because for those of you who don't know, I'll play a lot of games beforehand testing out the tactic, making tweaks, making changes here and there, just working out, seeing what works and what doesn't, because like we say, we don't just recreate them, we adapt to them for the game so that it will work. And I was getting really frustrated, and then it finally came time to record the game that you see on the right hand side, and again, I was still frustrated. I was quite angry and stuff just with the game in general because the gameplay is so poor. At first, I wasn't really showcasing the system as much. But in the second half, particularly 60 minutes onwards, what you'll see is when I started to calm myself down and just relax a little bit, I really started to get into the system, utilise it how it's supposed to be played, and we started playing some really nice stuff. Scored 2 really nice goals, a real tiki-taka-esque. Started doing a lot of the tips that I'm going to tell you about in the game, and it worked a whole lot better. So ultimately, an enjoyable formation, and if the game is on your side, you will have some fun playing this. So let's get into it. First things first, let's talk about the system. So we start off with this 3-4-3 flat, but we are going to make a change or two. And the first one is Sergio Busquets, who we got on the right hand side here. We change him from centre midfield to right defensive midfielder. And so the reason being is that obviously Busquets isn't going to be bombing forward on the pitch. He's going to be, just staying within that hole, remaining, within those sort of deep lying areas where he can be that playmaker. Pedri, on the other hand, you're going to change him to left central midfielder. And the reason why we're doing this so that there's a right defensive midfielder and a left central midfielder is mainly because Frenkie de Jong, who of course is playing as centre back here, who's dropped in more in recent weeks, you'll find that in real life, but also what we can exploit on the game is that we can bring him out more. And what it does is that because they're right and left central midfielder, they'll just create a little bit more space in the central areas because they drift a yard or two further wide, and it creates space for him to drive through the middle, which, as you'll see, it's something in the gameplay that we try to utilise as much as possible, because he's a very technically gifted player, is Frenkie de Jong, and you can get him into those situations, so it's more replicating what he's used to in terms of playing that defensive midfield role. It's a real all-rounded role, that middle centre-back. We will come on to that shortly as well. But yes, so you're going to want them at right defensive midfield and left central midfield. The two wing-backs, we play them as left and right midfielders. For any of you who haven't seen my videos, my tactics videos before, don't worry about them not being a wing back. The reason why we have them at midfield is because it just means they get further forward and they create more width. They get further wide as well, pretty much on the touchline. But if you put them on comeback on defence, on the player instructions, which we will talk about shortly, then they will also bed back in and create a back five when you don't have the ball. So they do still play like wing backs. It's just a far more effective way of replicating that. Other than that, though, that is it for the positions. We can now move on to the tactics screen. So defensively, we've got press after possession loss here. And ultimately, I can't help but think in the game it would actually be better with constant pressure. But obviously, whilst we want it to work in game, we want to try and replicate the system as best as we can. And they're not this sort of extreme pressing side under Koeman. They're more of a counter press, but then bed back into their shape. Ultimately, what you'll find is they don't have to do a lot of pressing in games because they have possession for the majority of it. And I'm talking 65, 70, 75% possession, perhaps even more. So they're not, a lot of time they're not having to press, and when they do, it often results very quickly in the opposition just booting it forward. But yeah, it's a shame really that we don't have this more extreme pressing. That's something maybe you guys should try, see if you can have any fun out of constant pressure. Something I didn't actually try, but maybe I should give it a go, because I think that the shape of the team would really lend itself. But we do have press after possession loss. With defensive width, move this up to 5, because obviously you've got a lot more players in the central areas, the 3 centre-backs for example, you got the 4 in midfield. You can be a little bit wider, you can get out to them more, particularly the AI and FIFA like to play wide often. You know, they just sort of dally about with it in the wide areas, so you know, you can get out to a bit more with a nice balanced 5 with width. And with depth we have this on 10. So usually what you find is I'll adapt this so that we have this on 8, because then you still have a high line, but your defense will just drop off a yard or 2 to basically try and combat, you know, over the top through balls and counter attacking through balls with the pace of the opposition, because it's easily exploited on this game. But the reason why we got this on 10, obviously yes, they do play a high line, but we haven't adjusted it because what we'll talk about shortly is how the centre backs will actually join the attack, and so we want them to be as high up as possible. We'll go into that when I come on to the centre back player instructions very, very shortly, so don't worry about that, we will come back to it. Offensively, obviously possession, don't need to explain that one, you know how they sort of have always played. With width, we've got this on 2, so you want players getting as central and as close to each other as possible, particularly those front 3, those attacking 3. You want them in those intricate spaces in the central areas of the pitch, and we'll come on to them shortly as well. They'll be roaming about and doing a lot of movement, but when it comes to those sort of advanced attacking areas, you know, you want them sort of just as close to each other as possible, just to complement that sort of short passing game, and various players will create space and create width. Ultimately it's a system where lots of players are doing lots of different things, but with width on 2 you can really supplement that sort of close passing game. With players in the box, we have this on 7, so obviously you'll have the 3 attackers in the box, and then you'll have 1 central midfielder sometimes drifting in, usually obviously Pedri. One thing I should probably say here is usually this is pretty much the lineup that they've generally been going with, minus a couple of rotations. What I will say is it's actually been Mingueza who has played at right centre-back rather than Umtiti. But as you can see, he's obviously 68 rated. He's not very good on this game. I didn't see the point in trying to forge ahead with him when I know just wasn't really going to be worth it. So ultimately we did go with Umtiti, but obviously I will suggest players with you. Also what I'll say is we went with Pedri and Busquets, and I'll suggest this again when we come onto the player instructions and the suitable players to sign. But you'll see that at half time I actually changed these around because I didn't think they were very good. Busquets just too slow, doesn't have that physical upside on the game, and Pedri fairly low rated as well. Doesn't really have the traits you're looking for in that position. So I changed this to Coutinho and Pjanic, and works much better, much better. So I definitely advise that if you are playing as Barcelona. With corners and free kicks, we move this up to 4, as we do so in every video. I had someone comment recently saying, you know, why don't you change it depending on what teams do? But really, it's the same for majority of teams. Teams will leave 2 to 3 players back, and the rest will be in the box. You may occasionally have someone come short, in which case you can replicate that in game by just calling a man short. But other than that, not really a lot for you to do. So just move them up to 4, and it gives you the best opportunity. So that rounds it off for tactics. Next we can move on to player instructions. What we do here is we start off with the goalkeeper and we'll work our way up the field. So starting off with ter Stegen, we've got him on sweeper keeper. Obviously that will supplement and complement the high defensive line that you're going to be playing, so it adds an extra line of defence for any over the top through balls. And we also have comes for crosses as well. A very aggressive keeper, and often in these sort of systems they are, and they have to be, and they replicate that in the way they deal with crosses as well. Also on the game, it does help you out. It offers you more protection. Crosses fairly tough to deal with on this game depending on the sort of situation, so that just helps you out a bit. Keepers are a bit protected on this game. Now moving on to centre backs, we did allude to this earlier. So we've got the 3 here. Now as you can see, the 2 wing sort of centre backs, and in the right sided centre back and the left sided centre back, you'll see I've got these on join the attack. Now it doesn't work. That role, that instruction never works when you put join the attack. It makes no difference. But what you'll find in game is, and it's something that we alluded to here when we talked about depth 10, is that what you'll find is the right and left sided centre backs, or Frenkie de Jong actually in times, which you'll see in the gameplay, will often join the attack. They'll overlap, they'll bring the ball forward, they'll play it and then look to run on, as you'll see me exploit sometimes in the gameplay. And that's why we have them on 10, because it just helps to support that sort of system that you're playing. A little bit like, you know, dare I say, and compare Barcelona to them, bit of a Chris Wilder's Sheffield United with the whole overlapping centre-back thing. Not quite as drastic as that, but often you will see centre-backs do it, and that's part of the reason why you see Mingueza sort of playing for Barca more often, because he's very, very good at that. So ultimately you do have that, and like I say, it doesn't work, but it's there nonetheless. You will have to do it manually. You press LB and A or L1 and X depending on the console you're playing on, and then you obviously pass it off, and then they'll run forward and you can get them into the game. It just adds another man. The whole point of it is it adds another man, another runner for them to try and keep an eye on and focus on, and often they go unmarked because obviously it's added someone else in and they're not expecting it. So a very, very handy tactic. In terms of the suggested players, you want pacey players, obviously technically gifted players, because they're bringing the ball out from the back. With the right and left sided centre backs, like I say, you want sort of athletic players. With the central centre-back, you can be a little bit more lenient. Obviously, we've got Frenkie de Jong, and he can play centre-back. He's done that at Ajax as well as Barca, but mainly a central midfielder or a defensive midfielder. Someone who's technically very gifted, and you can get him into the game, sort of create space for him, and he can start pinging passes around, finding players who are in space. Very, very handy. So yeah, we do have that for the centre backs. Next up, we can go on to the wing backs. We have obviously Sergio Dest and Jordi Alba as well. They both have the same instructions, as you can see here. So first off, stay wide. Obviously they're the ones creating the most width in the team generally, and that's what you're really looking for from your wing backs. With support runs, we have these on come short. Whenever you want them to sort of run in behind, often it will be down to manual again. So you're pressing LB and A, L1 and X, and you're give and go, producing give and go passes, 1-2 passes, etc. That's actually how we score the 4th goal. So if we do get to that on the gameplay, hopefully you see that, because it's a very, very, very good goal. Again, so otherwise though, you're obviously trying to complement that short passing game, create as much options as possible. When you get impressed, which you will see in the gameplay, when our centre backs are getting pressed, because they're coming short, they're offering more of an options, easier to play out from the back, easier to get it out to them. We support on crosses, stay on the edge of the box for crosses. As we alluded to earlier in the tactics, we've got 3/4 players getting into the box, and that will usually be the central midfielder, who's the fourth one. Otherwise, it will be these 3 attackers. You don't want to leave yourself too open. You want these guys creating the width when the ball, sort of is headed out, for example, defended by the opposition. It will usually be these guys picking up the ball. Other than that, though, that is it for the wing backs. Next up, we've got the central midfielders, starting off with the defensive midfielder, in this case Sergio Busquets. We've got cut passing lanes. Obviously, man marking on this game doesn't really work anyway, as you'll all know really from playing the game, so you may as well just go cut passing lanes. That is what they do anyway. They don't have a man marking system. They're more zonal orientated, as are the majority of pressing possession-based teams, really, other than a couple like Marcelo Bielsa's Leeds, for example. So other than that, yeah, you just stick to cut passing lanes. It's only him who can do it anyway, because only defensive midfielders can be set to that. So ultimately, doesn't make too much of a difference. And obviously, with attacking support, stay out while attacking. Like we say, he's a deep line playmaker, and he'll also fill in when you've got the likes of the centre backs storming forward, as we've spoken about, overlapping, underlapping, joining the attack. He's going to fill in for them just by constantly dotting around in those deep areas. So that is really, really handy as well. And finally, for defensive position, we've got these on cover wing, because of course the likes of the wing backs and the wingers, the attackers, everyone all getting forward. You need someone in those spaces to protect those holes if and when you need it. On to Pedri, of course, as a central midfielder, his roles are slightly different. We've still got him on cover wing for the same reason, and obviously we've got him on stay at the edge of the box for crosses. Like we say, with the players in the box instruction, we have this on 3/4. Ultimately, it will be a case of he will occasionally drift in there, because we've got attacking support on balanced attack, and that's really what we're trying to get the most out of. We really want that balance. We don't want him committing every time, because sometimes he plays a role of that pivot, and when it drops out of the area, because you've got the 3 attackers already in there, he's the one ready, along with the wing backs, to sort of pick up the loose balls, and then Barcelona can continue their attack. That's essentially how they're so good at maintaining possession throughout a large majority of their games. So yeah, that's a pretty self-explanatory role in itself, really pretty simple. I guess we can move on to the 3 attackers now, and this is where the real fun begins. Trying not to sound too much like Anakin Skywalker there. So we've got 3 different roles here. Now obviously I've set these guys out as Dembele in the middle, Griezmann on the left, Messi on the right. Ultimately, anyone who's watched Barcelona play in this system will know it's just a rotational game. They don't have set positions. They're all rotating amongst each other, and that's how we've tried best to recreate it, with a couple of tactical tweaks. So who do we start here with? We'll start with Griezmann. So we've got him on comeback on defence, and spoiler alert, it'll be him and Dembele on comeback on defence. Messi, of course, stay forward, but we'll move on to that. And then with chance creation, we've got him on free roam. So this is really, really fun to play with, actually, this sort of instruction. When you've got these wingers on free roam, ultimately they're just picking up lots of space. They're all over the pitch, lots of movement, which is what you want. Ultimately, if you've got these guys moving around all the time, you come across 2 things. One, either the opposition are man marking, in which case you're dragging their defenders and midfielders all over the place, or 2, they're going for more of a zonal approach, in which case you're going to find that your players are in a lot more space because of that movement, because players aren't going to be able to pick them up in that zonal sort of marking system all the time. So it's really, really fun to play with, very, very handy. The best way to get movement from your attackers in terms of free roam. And then with support runs, we've got them on come short as well. So ultimately, it's a case of, as we spoke about earlier, getting into those intricate advanced attacking areas as much as possible, particularly in the centre. But like I say, they're on free roam, so ultimately they'll be all over the place. They'll support the wing back, they'll support the central midfielder, they'll support the other attackers. They offer that short passing option, and it's really, really helpful. And finally, on support on crosses, get into box for cross. We've already spoke about that, don't really need to go into much more detail. On the other hand, we do have Messi here, and it's the same roles other than defensive support, stay forward. Obviously, you don't want Messi tracking back. You don't want Messi going out of his way at all. You want him as fresh as possible. You just want to get him on the ball. Just want as simple as you'll see in this game as well. He doesn't score, but he's so instrumental to the performance. Just really, really handy. So good, particularly in tight spaces to get out as well. Very, very handy indeed. And that free roam, it's just made for him. You know, that role, it's just absolutely made for him. He picks up so many good positions, comes deep, goes wide, goes into central advanced areas, just goes everywhere. And it's really, really fun to play with. Finally, we have Dembele, who we've got as the striker here. Now, as you can see, it's a little bit different. First off, we have support runs, and we have this on drift wide. So obviously, we spoke about the movement, and so obviously the wingers on free roam, they'll come centrally, they'll come deep, etc. But how do you get a striker sort of creating that movement, drifting around as much as possible? Well, you have him on drift wide, and therefore you'll still have him picking up lots of space, particularly when you see that the opposition fullbacks have committed. All of a sudden he'll drift wide and running behind into those spaces vacated, and it's very, very handy. Leading on from that, we've got getting behind on attacking runs as well. What you'll find is really it's that two of the three attackers are sort of in those more possession orientated, intricate, advanced spaces, and then one of them will run in behind. Very usually it's either Dembele or Griezmann. Obviously we can't rotate in this game, it has to be one or the other from the preset instructions, so we go with Dembele because obviously he is the more pacey player. Obviously you've got the likes of Ansu Fati as well, or who can contribute, so you can mix that up if and how you want to. Ultimately you've got three very versatile attackers who can do a range of different roles. So yeah, we have him on getting behind, and defensive support come back on defense as well. Like we say, you shouldn't need this loads. Obviously I was playing Real Madrid, so it's a little bit of a tougher game. They are going to have more of the ball than other teams, but then when you're playing the likes of you just sort of standard run-of-the-mill La Liga teams, don't want to single anyone out just in case anyone supports them, but you're obviously going to see a lot more of the ball. You're going to have 60, 65, 70% possession, maybe more. They shouldn't be having to trap back too much. When the opposition have the ball, usually it should be in their own defensive third, and you're pressing them, you know, almost instantly after losing the ball. So you shouldn't need that too much. So that is it for this system then, guys. Really, really fun one to do. Really fun one to cover. Absolutely loved it. Like I say, it was highly suggested, without doubt the highest suggested tactic in recent times. Obviously, a lot of people love it. So really, really fun one to cover and to play with. It's got me thinking that I'm probably ready to do another tactics tier list very soon, so do keep an eye out for that. We'll probably get one or two more out, and then I think we'll have enough to really cover in a tactics tier list, because that did go down very, very well last year, so do keep an eye out for that. As always, if you've got any questions about the tactic, about the system, about suitable players, etc., do get at me in the comment section. I'll try to respond to as many comments as possible. Usually I can respond to all of them, but some do slip through the net, so do forgive me for that. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and ring the bell so that you get notifications every time I upload. Give my second channel a subscribe. It's called Broma Ball. We cover a lot of real football there. Really going to start banging content out on that. So do give that a check out as well. Leave a like on the video if you've enjoyed it, and on that note, we are going to finish it off there. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, I will see you soon.